Petrol car sales are down, diesel car sales have almost disappeared, EV car sales are down, but hybrid sales are dramatically up, staggeringly up. What's going on? Because they might just turn out to be an even bigger con than Dieselgate. I'm Dave. Welcome to Dave Takes It On. Are the hybrids that people buy actually what they think they have bought or wanted to buy? The answer, as you will learn, is absolutely not. Well, first let's define what a hybrid is, and there appear to be at least 6 types, well 7 if you count Formula 1. And the first type is an HEV, or hybrid electric vehicle. Well, immediately we get 4 types of HEV and the confusion starts. See, an HEV has a petrol engine and 1 or more electric motors. These cannot be charged by plugging into the mains or at an EV charger. They are always charged from the petrol engine or from regenerative braking. See, normal brakes use friction pads, which turns movement or kinetic energy into heat, and that slows the car down, taking energy out of the speed. Regenerative brakes turn the kinetic energy into electricity, and that can be used or stored in a battery for later use. But we find now that there are at least 4 types of HEV. First, the mild HEV, which has a very small battery and motor, and it's impossible for the car to drive using just the electric motors. The car is always driven by the petrol engine, so the electricity only ever assists. Then we have the HEV, the normal, the original, and this has a smallish 12-volt battery. It is big enough just to enable the car to drive just a mile or so. So when you're driving at very low speeds, like in traffic or when you set off, the electric motor actually drives the car very briefly, but almost instantly the petrol engine takes over. And finally, we have 48-volt battery HEVs. Well, these are similar, but the 48-volt battery allows a lot more storage, so can drive the car a bit further. Well, to confuse matters, the 48-volt system can be a mild or a full hybrid. So a 48-hour mild hybrid is still restricted to just a couple of miles, maybe 3 or 4 instead of 1 or 2. Manufacturers like Kia advertise 4 varieties of HEVs, then a further 2 versions of plug-in hybrids, PHEVs. Well, I'm confused. I ask the genuine question, does anyone out there with a hybrid actually know what they've bought? I asked a couple of my neighbours with HEVs, and none of them knew there were 4 HEVs and 2 PHEVs. They were both just told the electric motors make it more efficient and cleaner, and the final price. Well, I find this totally frightening. It is putting total trust in the dealers. The salesman said it, so it must be true. Are buyers really that gullible? Well, it seems so when it comes to hybrids. But why is it important? Well, just for now, I'm going to ignore the 2 PHEVs, as they are the biggest con of all time. Wait till you see what they actually do in the real world. So what are the savings of an HEV, a hybrid, versus petrol? Oh, just a spoiler alert, those savings, which are probably the main reason people choose hybrids, can be less than 2%. Yeah, 2%. Mild HEVs offer, at the worst, just a mile or 2 extra in fuel economy. But they are very little dearer than the petrol-only version, maybe 1,000 or 2,000. So they're not much dearer, but there's not much saving either. Full HEVs cost a lot more, offer more in savings, but we're still only talking about 5% if you're lucky. Knocking 5% off your fuel bill is not exactly exciting. In fact, in my opinion, not even worth it. Just go slightly slower, cut out the harsh acceleration of braking, and you can save 10% today. Well, let me throw this question out to you, you hybrid owners, not PHEV, just hybrid drivers. Without checking, do you know if you have a mild or a full, a 12-volt or 48-volt HEV? Be honest, let me know in the comments down below. Most drivers I've talked to don't. Okay, well, let's get out of the fantasy world of the official economy figures that they love quoting and get into real-world testing. And for this, I turn to Which. For this set of figures, they are independent and they actually carry out their own tests. And in this case, they quote they've used 135 diesel cars, 169 petrol cars, and 20 full hybrids. Now, at this point, note, they are full hybrids. Mild hybrids offer far less savings, but they're not featured in this set of results. Well, these tests show you the best you can expect in the real world, and the results are absolutely horrendous. The average combined figures they got in the tests: petrol only, 41.9 miles to the gallon. Diesel only, 46.8 miles to the gallon. Petrol hybrid, 53.2 miles to the gallon. Well, let me put that into financial context. Petrol at local supermarkets is hovering around the £1.40 a litre. Diesel is £1.45. So, a car in the Which test, if it was doing 8,000 miles a year at 41.9 miles per gallon, would spend £1,202 per year. That's over £100 a month. A petrol hybrid at 53.2 miles per gallon would spend £947, saving £255 a year. I bet your salesman didn't tell you £250 saving when he quoted you 3, 4 or 5,000 extra to buy the hybrid over pure petrol, did he? For most people, the savings will never cover the extra cost. Don't forget, this is full hybrid. This is the best you get. If you've got a mild hybrid, your savings will be significantly less. Okay, average round town is much better, much more worthwhile. So do the same sums for just round town, never going on a dual carriageway or motorway. You pay just £711 a year. That's a saving of £491. Once again, if you pay thousands extra for a hybrid, you are unlikely to ever get it back. If you buy new cars, you probably change your car every 3 or 4 years. You will never get back in savings the extra that you pay to own a full hybrid. Okay, so forget Which. Let's ask The Guardian for corroborating evidence for these pitiful savings. And their headlines state virtually the same. Hybrids cost £500 a year more than the official tests, and that falls directly in line with the Which tests. And what cars state that the best hybrid they ever tested, and they tested an awful lot of cars, was the Toyota Yaris hybrid, which got 64.2 miles to the gallon. I have to say, there are plenty of petrol-only cars that get more than this, well, officially at least. So hybrids are being sold as being more efficient and saving you money, plus cutting your CO2 and exhaust emissions, but to be true, it's barely noticeable. Sorry, but if you buy a petrol full HEV, you would in most cases be better off buying the full petrol version for thousands of pounds cheaper. Well, now we turn to plug-in hybrids, and the situation deteriorates dramatically. Being a hybrid vehicle, a PHEV has both a petrol or diesel engine, of the very few diesels these days, and a medium-sized battery. On average, PHEVs can be driven about 30 miles on battery power alone, although there are some newer models that offer longer range. Once the battery runs out and the petrol or diesel engine takes over for the rest of the journey, a PHEV has a charging socket, which means it can be plugged in to charge its battery. This allows you to access cheap electricity and lower the cost of your motoring. And this is the first big con. Let's talk about range. Typical range for a PHEV is about 25 or 30 miles. That can be as much as 50 on some bigger models with bigger batteries. But when the battery is discharged, all of its energy, the petrol or diesel engine automatically kicks in, and that gives you another 200, 350 miles of range. And here's the bit most people aren't told or aren't aware of. To be able to run on battery power and benefit from cheap electricity, the PHEV driver needs to charge the battery every single day. I don't make these things up, but I talk to people, and the people I've talked to who have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles don't actually charge their vehicles every day. In fact, some of them don't ever charge it at all. I talked to one driver who said they didn't buy a battery electric vehicle, 100% that is, because they can't charge at home, so they bought a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. And they believed it was going to save them money. Well, quite how this works in their mind, I have no idea. Do they believe the battery magically charges up to full on its own, or that on a drive the car will recharge the battery somehow miraculously? Well, it doesn't. Okay, so now let's have a look at some reality. Are PHEVs any good? Well, if you only drive less than 30 miles a day and you recharge fully every night religiously and you have a cheap overnight tariff, your PHEV should run mostly on battery power alone, be very economical and be fairly green. Unless you've changed to a cheap overnight tariff, specifically for EVs, your electricity will be charged at a full rate of around 27 pence currently per kilowatt hour. Only if you switch to a tariff will you get the cheaper rate, and that will go down to about 6 or 7 pence, and that makes a huge difference. But let's look at longer trips. You see, even if you charge overnight at a cheap rate, when you set off, your first maybe 20 or 30 miles will be using electricity, and that'll be the cheap bit of the motoring. But at the end of the first 20 or 30 miles, your battery's now empty, and the rest of the trip you will consume petrol or diesel using only the internal combustion engine, and your emissions will be exactly the same, and your cost of petrol will be exactly the same as if it was just a standard petrol or diesel car. In reality, surveys have found time after time that because when the battery runs out, you can just carry on driving on petrol or diesel, most people can't be bothered to plug them in every day. Many of them don't ever do it. They don't have an external wall socket, weatherproof and suitable for charging an EV. Others really don't understand that without charging it at home, all you're doing is driving around in a petrol car with now a very heavy battery and the electric motor which are not being used, and you've paid thousands of pounds extra for that privilege. So let's take a look at the official figures for PHEVs, and let's go a bit realistic now. Let's get into the real world. The tests they do are generally shorter individual tests, and that means that for the test, it will almost always be running on the battery. That's not what happens in real life. And this is why the which states the claimed range of a BMW X5 luxury SUV is 188.3 miles minimum, yet their tests only got 52.8 miles, a simply astronomical difference. They tested the BM2 Series Active Tourer. That did even worse, claiming 156.9 miles per gallon minimum, but they got 44.8. In both cases, your actual fuel costs would be around £700 more than you would have expected. Then they tested the Mercedes GLE. That claims 313 miles per gallon, a staggering figure, but achieved an equally staggering 104.6. But that's still £300 more expensive than you were led to believe. Well, the best car they tested, this was Autocar now, and they found that was the Toyota Yaris with 188.3 miles claimed against 114.4 achieved. And that cost only £170 more than you were led to believe. Well, in a follow-up test, the emissions of PHEVs were obviously also linked directly to the actual low miles per gallon figure achieved. If they use more fuel, they produce more emissions and CO2. And tests indicate the actual results are as much as 4 times higher emissions than the manufacturers claimed. This actually makes Dieselgate look really tame. Their figures were better, but not by that massive amount. Hybrid and PHEV actual figures are as much as 4 times more than the stated figures. This is a national scandal. I believe it's a bit like saying this petrol car can do 400 miles per gallon, only to find that the test consisted of starting the engine and then pushing the car from the top of a very long hill. They achieved 400 miles per gallon equivalent, but that's definitely not what you or I could or would get in real life. I'm convinced that the majority of HEV and PHEV drivers are not getting anywhere near what they were promised, and that a good number of them would not have bought their HEV or PHEV if presented with the actual figures, the real world figures, before signing the contract. Well, this new government needs to ban these fictitious tests immediately and force manufacturers to publish actual test results carried out under real-world scenarios. This includes full petrol, full diesel, micro HEV, full HEV, 48-volt HEV, PHEV, 48-volt PHEV, and yes, full EVs 100%. By the way, for any of you who lasted this long, the 7th type of hybrid is the Formula 1 hybrid. It's a true HEV. The battery is charged up only from the engine, but from a multitude of sources. This includes regenerative braking, but also they have regen from the turbocharger. But they also have the ability, before the race starts, of charging it up fully from the mains. That's the best of all worlds, as long as you've got $1 million to spare. I'm Dave. Thanks for watching.